Good morning, everyone. 9 a.m. in Houston. Everyone's got their coffee. Absolute pleasure to be here. A lot of folks from the Department of Homeland Security in here, so to my colleagues, thank you very much for your support and being here today. I know that our stakeholders get a lot out of your presence and your subject matter expertise. Formerly known as the National Protection Programs Director, or NPPD, say that 10 times fast. Now known as CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and that is the proper way to say it, CISA. Today, with a name like that, I think people understand the moment you walk through that door, what is that value proposition back and forth. I think before there was, what are these folks doing here? What is the value? What are the products and services they're bringing to the table? Because they didn't really fully understand the name and the capability. Now with the name change, based off of November of 2018, we now have that on the business cards. The value proposition is there, and I think there's a unique understanding that we are focused on reducing risk and driving risk down. We are known as our nation's risk advisors. And notice I did not say risk managers. That is industry's job. Today, we are focused on providing subject matter expertise, guidance, industry best practices, and pushing them into industry for them to utilize, for them to consume, to ultimately drive down risk and protect our critical infrastructure. We do this through a number of different programs, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we are focused on raising that security baseline for the critical infrastructure world. We do this through voluntary and incentive-driven programs, but also partnerships and capacity building. One of our major themes is defend today and secure tomorrow. And I think within the Department of Homeland Security over the last 15, 17 years, we've done a lot of great things that nobody knows about. And so today is our opportunity to be more visible. The things and the products and the services that we have, pushing them out so people know where to consume them, where to get them, and ultimately how to use them. And as we think about defend today, there are the tactical things that we need to do day in and day out that we in this room are a major part of the national security apparatus, and we do this every single day. But we also need to think big. We also need to think about what does infrastructure protection look like in the year 2045 and 2050. When everything is protected, your cell phone is connected to my cell phone, which is connected to a coffee pot, which is connected to a refrigerator, which is connected to the 69 kV distribution substation, which might be connected to your port. These introduce new enemy avenues of approach when everything is interconnected. And so these are the things that we should be thinking about now under blue sky conditions prior to crisis events. So our mission is very clear, and that is to lead the national effort to understand and reduce risk to our critical infrastructure. Our vision is very succinct, and that is to lead the national, we want secure and resilient infrastructure through national leadership. Today, really what I want to focus on is our priorities within CISA. As a new agency, I want to re-educate and allow you the opportunity to really hear what the priorities are from the new or the newest operational component within the Department of Homeland Security. In that, I'll also discuss a lot of the initiatives and the workings and the ongoings that we're doing to secure our port infrastructure across the country. So number one, and in no particular order, but our number one priority right now is election security. We know for a fact that nation-state actors were in our elections providing influence behind the scenes in 2016. They were back in 2018, and we know for a fact that they will be back in 2020. I am happy to say, I'm very proud to say that today we are better prepared to understand what those risks are, what those threats are, and respond in near real time. We have stood up an elections information sharing and analysis center. We have engaged with all 50 secretaries of state. And so we have this information sharing channel, this conduit to share information back and forth, so that when we see indicators of compromise, when we see malicious activity in New York, we're able to give Los Angeles the heads up that something is happening. We have worked with our state and local partners to ensure that the 2020 elections will be the most protected elections that we've ever seen. 5G, supply chain, and mitigating the threat to Chinese espionage. At 9 a.m. this morning, I don't think you thought you were going to talk about Chinese espionage. But today, we are seeing nation-state actors from overseas that are intent on grabbing our intellectual property, embedding into our systems, stealing information, stealing proprietary trade secrets, schematics, maps, etc., understanding how our infrastructure works and using it for their own benefit. Today, as we approach and really focus on the 5G issue, we need to understand that we cannot bolt security on in the rear. Security conversations must be happening now as we move the IT and technology infrastructure forward in this country. I think many of the vendors in this room, many of the end users in this particular room will understand that when we start bolting security on as an afterthought after the fact, that is when we introduce vulnerabilities into the system. And so as we have these technology conversations moving forward, conversations must include security. Industrial control systems. IT, OT, SCADA, however you want to classify them, they remain vulnerable today. And it's these systems that are pushing electricity from point A to point B. They're cleaning our drinking water. They are manufacturing the chemicals that we use for our critical products and services every single day. We cannot have legacy, unpatched systems pinging on the internet for bad actors to exploit. Today, right now, we are seeing industrial control systems pinging on the open internet that belong to and are owned and operated by critical infrastructure owners and operators. We must patch and remove these systems from the open internet. And CISA currently offers a number of services and offerings to the industrial control system community. Vulnerability scanning, risk and vulnerability assessments, remote penetration testing, and validating the architecture and design review for our OT systems. We are driving technology innovation across the community to mature a collective ICS cyber defense capability. Protecting our government networks, number 4. And notice I did not say protecting our federal government networks. As we have seen ransomware attacks happen across the country, we owe it to our state and local partners to pass along indicators of compromise, pass along the cyber hygiene tools that we have, pass along the things that we are seeing so that we can start putting puzzle pieces together and start painting a picture of a complete threat landscape, not only for the .gov, but also for our state and local partners. And lastly, number 5, soft targets and crowded places. Since coming to CISA, my priorities have really been dictated by the need for risk reduction surrounding soft targets, crowded places, and the mass gathering areas that we all enjoy day in and day out. These soft targets such as mall, stadiums, racetracks, outdoor venues, and these public gathering areas do not have the traditional security apparatus in place that you might see at an airport, at a DoD facility. And so it is upon the Department of Homeland Security to really push out target hardening. How is it that we are passing along our physical security protective measures to ensure that the marathon that you might run this weekend is better protected? The concert that you might frequent with your family this weekend is better protected. These are the protection measures that we have in place today, and through our Protective Security Advisor program, our PSA program, these are the folks in the field that have the security subject matter expertise that can really start to walk the property, understand what those gaps are, and provide the venue managers, provide the concert goers with the security protections that they need in order to become a harder target. So the threat environment has absolutely evolved. Over the past couple years, we've seen more attacks on locations that naturally attract crowds of people. Whether it's the Walmart in El Paso, the Bar District in Dayton, Ohio, the synagogues of Pittsburgh and Poway, the Harvest Festival concert series in Las Vegas, or vehicle ramming events in Nice, France, and New York City, we understand that society is becoming more and more violent every single day. Racially motivated hate groups, extremist groups, and those individuals here in the United States with radical violent views are intent on creating damage to our soft targets and crowded places. Americans expect that they will be safe and secure as they cheer on their favorite team, as they practice their religious beliefs, they dine out, or they go to a concert. We have heard the administration's call. Shortly after the deadly events of Gilroy, El Paso, and Dayton, DHS collectively put our resources together. We asked ourselves, what are the things that we have right now at our fingertips to push out into the field, to push out into industry that they can utilize today? And so whether it is a clearance, whether it is an exercise or an exercise in a box that's ready to go, whether it's protective measures that we can have a conversation about, what is the capability gap that you are currently experiencing? Let me try and meet you halfway and get you the things that you need in order to become a more secure facility. And so I've talked a little bit about soft targets, but we're also focused on the insider threat. And I know here within the port apparatus, insider is a significant concern. Today, it is our understanding that we have individuals within our organizations, within our companies, within the private sector that have the institutional knowledge as to how to bring us to our knees. They understand what the keys to the kingdom are. They understand what the crown jewels are. And so today, having an insider threat program, a threat management program that looks at cybersecurity, physical security, and emergency management, and understanding who works for us is where we need to gravitate towards as we invest our money into the security apparatus moving forward. And I know that we are already focusing our budgets on the years 2024, 2025, 2026. We need to start understanding that the threat may reside from within. And for us to say, yeah, we do background checks every 7 years, we're good, is faulty. That is a recipe for disaster. We need to gravitate towards continuous evaluation, understanding who works for us, understanding what is happening on our systems on the data side, on the logical side. And so when we have very key documents, proprietary secrets, customer information, trade secrets, the things that we really, really care about, do our systems, are they smart enough to alert us when this information is leaving our corporate IT systems? Have we done data classification? And on the physical security side, is our access control system smart enough to realize that people might be probing our systems? People might be doing reconnaissance upon us. And I'll give you a case in point. If you're based out of Washington, D.C., and 2 hours south, Sunday afternoon at 4:30 p.m., somebody's trying to badge into a facility down there that they do not have access to, is your access control system smart enough to say, something is going on here? And let's say the system works, access denied. Is the system alerting you to the fact that there might be somebody who is trying to probe your particular system? And on the pathway to violence piece, engaging human resources, understanding that violence may happen in the workplace. And so having a threat management program together where it includes human resources, legal, security, operations, and all of those individuals that really start to paint an entire picture of when employees might be doing something nefarious and or violent. The technology exists today. And so this is really where we should be investing moving forward. And the other thing that we're very focused on right now is drones, or unmanned aerial systems. And I know within the port system, you guys are very concerned about this as well. And from my perspective, from a federal government perspective, I think we are a day late and a dollar short on this particular initiative. We are still wrestling around with tail numbers on the back of drones. And we fully understand that you do not own the airspace above your infrastructure. Today, you can go to ISC, East or West, you can go to GSX, and you can see a football field's worth of technology on the trade floor that is illegal to deploy. They may not tell you that, but it is illegal to operate and deploy. Downing somebody else's hobby drone, downing somebody else's aircraft from the sky is currently illegal. And so I bucket this into really two distinct issues. Number one is the counter drone issue. We need to have legislation today out of Congress that really starts to look at the critical infrastructure needs surrounding the drone issue. And then private sector would then evaluate their needs as to how they would mitigate that threat above their substation, above their nuclear facility, above their port, etc. The second bucket is drones are a great tool. Drones are an awesome tool. Having come from industry, we've used drones to understand as the hurricane come up the coast. We had destruction in our system. I used to work at Duke Energy, and we fully understood what poles needed to go back into the ground, what substations were currently underwater, how many people were outaged, and we utilized drones to do that. However, if you own and operate a Chinese manufactured drone, you are potentially introducing and incurring risk. This is not the boogeyman. We have seen this with our own eyes. Be very, very mindful of anything that you connect to your corporate IT system. However, if you are introducing Chinese manufactured drones, be very, very mindful that your data may be leaving your system and going overseas. So what do we do about it? Shortly after coming to DHS, we initially put out an alert to industry where we talk about the threat. That's good. But we also talk about mitigation measures. If you already own these drones, what do you do about it? Remove the SD card, don't connect to the internet, completely wipe after you're done. There are certain things that you can do to protect yourself. If you have not seen the alert to industry on Chinese manufactured drones, please engage your ISAC, please engage your fusion center, please engage local law enforcement, as it is FOUO, but they have the ability to pass that information along. So CISA's mission is directly focused on securing and enhancing resilience. And this includes our nation's port infrastructure across the air, maritime, land, and cyber domains. We look at interdependencies and what resources ports need to operate reliably every single day. Port operations are highlighted and they depend on other infrastructure systems. Container terminals rely on cranes that require energy to operate reliably. Refineries, chemical plants, cruise lines, ferries, and other port operations also have high energy and clean water needs. Assessments show that port operations rely heavily on trucking, air, and rail transportation. But they also require a sophisticated labor force, container transfers, telecommunications, and systems that are central to the reliable operations of the port. So we work with our partners within industry, academia, and across government, our state and local partners, law enforcement, to ensure that you have the things that you need to operate reliably every single day. We also examine the economic contribution of ports to the nation and their impact and the reliability issues they would have if they all of a sudden went dark or they were not reliable any longer. The economic contribution of ports is substantial. We know that 90% of the volume of overseas trade enters and leaves the U.S. by ship. In fact, these vessels import over $1.1 trillion of goods in the year 2019. And we exported $588 billion worth of goods through all U.S. ports, representing 36% of all U.S. exports. 64 seaports and the Great Lakes ports account for 25.7% of the entire U.S. GDP in this country. Yes, ports are national security. Infrastructure security is national security, and these are absolutely critical for our attention and our protection each and every day. Such an important part and a large part of our economy and infrastructure is not immune to risk and/or threats, both cyber and physical. For example, the NotPetya cyber attack of 2017 caused $10 billion in damages worldwide, including $300 million in damages in the maritime industry. Hurricane Maria closed the port of San Juan in Puerto Rico, causing major consequences for Puerto Rico and stopping the sole source of IV bags filled with saline in North America. Ports are interdependent. Ports are dependent on other pieces of critical infrastructure. If we lose a port, there is cascading impacts. If we lose energy to that port, there are cascading impacts. And this is truly the value of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, understanding what the national landscape looks like when one thing goes bad, what are those ripple effects across the critical infrastructure community. So we're also working with our owners and operators to address the emergent threats such as pandemic. We are seeing this now with the actions to address the containment of COVID-19. Ports of entry have a heightened risk profile based off of the amount of international activity and the transactional operations that they utilize every single day. The public-private partnership is absolutely crucial. I see many of our law enforcement partners in here. I see TSA, I see the United States Coast Guard, I see CBP and others in here that are focused on keeping our ports secure and resilient. DHS is committed to the reliable port operations in moving the economy of the United States forward. Before I leave, there's typically 5 things that I like to say and impart upon the crowd based off of some of my experience over the last number of years doing critical infrastructure protection. Number 1, understand that the threat landscape is changing. The Department of Homeland Security today is not the same Department of Homeland Security that you saw post 9/11-2003. While we still do the anti-terrorism mission, we are also now focused on domestic terrorism, counterterrorism, nation-state threats that are focusing on your critical infrastructure. We've all heard the fact that 85% of all critical infrastructure is owned and operated by the private sector. The federal government owns very, very little. But what we do have is information. What we do have is intelligence. What we do have is best practices to push out into industry to help mitigate threats to infrastructure. 2, understanding your gaps. It's on the margins, it's on the folds, it's where you're not looking, is where the enemy wants to exploit. And one of the questions that I typically ask any audience that I'm talking to is are you prepared to be overwhelmed? When an event has happened, everyone is yelling on the radio at the exact same time. Information is unclear or it's inaccurate, and now there is blood on the ground. Are you prepared to be overwhelmed? And if the answer is maybe or no, then I suggest reconvening with your leadership, with your stakeholders, with your law enforcement partners to best understand how to respond and recover from an event. And based off of those response and recovery plans, exercise those plans. I will tell you that we do not magically get better in a time of crisis. We always default to the things that we know, the things that we have seen, the things that we have heard, things that we have tasted, things that we have witnessed. And this is why law enforcement and the military train every single day. Exercise these plans. And I'd be the first one to advocate that exercising annually may not be good enough. And when we understand the gaps, this really should be based off of our risk profile. Understanding what matters most. Understanding what those crown jewels are. I often say, let's protect diamonds like diamonds and pencils like pencils. We cannot protect all things. That would be a significant cost for us. But based off of the risk, based off of the things that we must absolutely protect in terms of our crown jewels to ensure the reliable operations for our customers, what are those? And then we start working our way out. The convergence between cyber and physical, number 3. This is here. Rarely do we see a cyber-only event or a physical-only event. Today, these worlds are converging. IT, OT, physical security, and emergency management. These worlds are blending. It is a hybrid attack landscape today. And so for us to say, yes, we meet with cybersecurity every other Tuesday, we're okay, is no longer good enough. We must be in the same room. The SOC must be co-located. We must be having these conversations each and every day to understand what that threat is to our companies in near real time. Number 4, understanding risk posed by third parties. You may have a compliance program. You might fall under MTSA. You might fall under our CFATS program. You might fall under NERC-CIP. You might fall under these other compliance programs that are out there. And you might think to yourself, as you dot the I, as you cross the T, my goodness, we have a good compliance program, which means we are secure. And for the sake of this argument, let's just assume that you are secure. But what about those that you depend on? What about your supply chain? What about your vendors down the road? Are they as secure as you? Can the enemy get to you through them? Have you made the field trip to some of your vendors to see what their physical and cybersecurity posture is back at the shop? I did this one time many years ago under a different hat, and I was absolutely appalled by what I saw, what I accessed, and I walked into the server room completely unobstructed. Could this be a similar story for you? And can you verify that? And number 5, information sharing is absolutely crucial. And this is pretty darn obvious. Right after this, there'll probably be another story about how information sharing is crucial. You go to the local media. We've been talking about this for the last 15 years, but this is our opportunity under blue sky conditions to engage with law enforcement, to bring them on site. So law enforcement has a clear understanding of if I'm responding to an active shooter scenario, this is what I'm walking into. This building is completely filled with cubicles, places to hide, glass everywhere, basements, locked doors, unlocked doors. What cameras can I utilize? Having these key relationships now under blue sky conditions is absolutely critical. And I'll tell you a quick little story. Years ago, I was a deputy sheriff in Los Angeles. And you go through the day and you respond call to call, and you're typically writing your report that needs to go to the sergeant, go up the chain of command, ultimately for it to be submitted to the department and processed. And any deputy would probably tell you, you always try to find the quiet place to write your reports. And typically, for whatever reason, I would sit right in front of an elementary school to write my reports. And you might think to yourself, well, wow, you're parking your black and white, because we use black and white in California. You parking your black and white radio car, your police car in front of the elementary school. You're making that elementary school a hard target. Thank you very much. In reality, that's not why I did it at all. I did it because I knew on the other side of that door was a free cup of coffee. What are the low-cost, no-cost things that you can do today to ensure that law enforcement is there on property? That relationship is stout, it is in place. And in this particular case, there was a revolving door of law enforcement on that elementary school. Everyone saw that elementary school as a relatively secure campus. So information sharing is crucial. As we move towards some of these 5 things that I just discussed, really one of the key themes here is collective defense. We are all in this together. Government is in this, private industry is in this, all the way down to the United States citizen is in this together. And this is where that theme of see something, say something comes into play. And we get some criticism from time to time on see something, say something. And I often say, look, it's a catch phrase, it's not a catch paragraph. And people are asking, well, what does it mean? What do you want us to do? Give us some direction. It is a call to action. If something seems out of the norm, if the hairs on the back of your neck start to stand up just a little bit, say something to somebody, preferably with the ability to do something about it. Things are always crystal clear in the rearview mirror. And if we can start putting puzzle pieces together, things that are out of the norm earlier, this will ultimately drive down risk and save lives. And I think we do this through a culture shift. Those of you who are from industry in here will recognize my little vignette here, and that is from, if you go back into the 1980s, 1985 timeframe, industry was very focused on safety. Safety, safety, safety. We were losing too many workers. People were being hurt, crushed, killed by large machines, and so we needed to institute and inject a safety culture into industry. And so today, typically before every staff meeting, what do? That 2-minute safety meeting, right? Everyone look around. Do you see any tripping hazards? If we need to evacuate the building, don't use the elevators, go down the stairs. AD is up on the wall. If we need to go all the way out and we need to evacuate, go to the restaurant across the street. Don't converge around the building. 2 minutes. And everyone is on the same page in terms of how to be safe in that particular meeting. I think we also need to add on another 45 seconds or another minute and do the security moment, where we're talking about piggybacking. We're talking about terrorism awareness. We're talking about see something, say something. We're talking about phishing campaigns. We're talking about, surveillance detection. We all operate and work at critical infrastructure. People are looking at you as a target. It is our people that we need to be leaning on to be that first line of a defense. Are they truly a part of the conversation? Have we shifted the culture towards security? And lastly, from an investment perspective, we need to focus on resilience. We need to assume that our worst day might be right around the corner. Are we resilient? Have we removed the single points of failure? Have we added redundancy into our system? Resilience is the governance of uncertainty. What have we done in terms of investing? Are we still investing in yesterday's threats? Or are we looking out upon the horizon to really focus on what is coming next? And lastly, the Department of Homeland Security cannot do this by ourselves. It takes patriots such as yourself. It takes Americans that are focused on the national security apparatus. As indicative of you being here today, number one, thank you. But number two, you're showing your willingness, your commitment to national security as it relates, in this particular case, to ports of entry, to maritime ports, etc. Know that you have a partner in the United States Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And thank you very much for having me.